No! Steve Jobs said the only way to do great work is to love what you do. But what if you love woodworking and still feel like you're not good enough? I sold a $4,000 custom desk, but let me tell you, I was far from ready to build a complex project like this. Totally out of my comfort zone and overwhelmed, this build had me question everything. But during that process, I learned something that anyone trying to make money from their woodworking hobby should know. I obviously was super excited when the client first approached me for a custom desk build. I thought this would be the first step into making some custom furniture pieces and kickstart my side hustle. The design process was super fun and the client had some incredible ideas that really pushed me to take my woodworking to my next level. I couldn't wait to get started on what would be the most challenging project I'd ever taken on. But as I got deeper into the build, the initial excitement didn't last long. The pressure was starting to get to me and things started to go wrong. But that's later down the track. For now, you can see I'm still super excited about this project. So don't worry too much about the sides because they can't be recovered usually. I have to rip them off and they can't be reused. This one I hope I can reuse for another form. And this is why I'm putting the tape on instead of just a spray, which is much faster and cheaper. But this saves me some money in the long run. For the sides, I'm only going to use a narrow crown stapler, super simple and easy, and then we caulk all the edges and the corners. Yeah, oh Jesus, hey. Rough zone slab. I've never worked with a rough zone slab beforehand. I always had it like at least skip planed. But with this one I need to conserve as much thickness as possible. So the first thing we have to do is we have to clean up everything and all the dirt off. And then once we halve it, because there's a little bit of a bow in there, once we halve it, hopefully most of the bow goes out. First things first, we have to really clean it up when we're gonna do that outside because that always makes a huge mess. Don't like to work on the ground, so cheers it is. You know that voice in your head telling you you're not good enough? What if I told you it's actually a sign you're on the right track? There's a weird paradox in woodworking and in life in general, where the most talented people often feel like they're faking it. It's called imposter syndrome, and it's way more common than you think. Let me break it down for you. Imposter syndrome is that nagging feeling that you are a fraud, even when you're clearly skilled at what you do. It's like your brain is playing a trick on you, making you doubt your abilities despite all the evidence that you're actually pretty good. Here's the kicker. Between 9 and 82% of people experience imposter syndrome at some point in their lives. That's a huge range, but it shows just how widespread this feeling is. So if you have ever felt like you're not cut out for woodworking or that you are somehow fooling everyone with your project, you're in good company. After hours of cleaning up the slab and now the foam is dry, we put some mold release on the sides as well. We're now ready to use our epoxy. We are using a new epoxy to me called Ice Epoxy. I got that recommended. We're trying it out today. It's a 2-to-1 ratio. This gets me very nervous. Now there's actually 5 different types of imposters when it comes to this syndrome. Let's see if any of those sounds familiar. First, we've got the perfectionist. This is the woodworker who freaks out over the tiniest flaws in their work. A slightly uneven joint? Time to scrap the whole project and start over. Then there's the natural genius. These folks rely on their raw talent and feel ashamed when they actually have to put effort into something. Ever felt frustrated when a new technique doesn't come to you easily? The rugged individualist or soloist is the one who thinks asking for help is a sign of weakness. They rather struggle alone in the workshop than admit they need a hand. Next up is the expert. This type feels like they need to know absolutely everything before they can call themselves competent. They're always chasing that next bit of knowledge, never feeling quite ready to tackle a big project. Finally, we've got the superhero. This is the woodworker who pushes themselves to excel in every single area of their craft, often at the expense of their own well-being. Sound familiar? I bet you can relate to at least one of these types. I know I can. When I was building this desk, I felt like a mix of the perfectionist and the expert. I was obsessing over every little detail and constantly feeling like I don't know enough to pull it off. But here's the thing. These feelings aren't a sign that you're not good enough. They're actually pretty common among high achievers. It's like the better you get, the more you realize how much there is to learn, and that can be overwhelming. Okay guys, so it's about a week later and the blue is dry, so it looks great. Off camera I scuffed up the surface of the epoxy just to get a bit of a mechanical bond to the clear. The clear pour is gonna be the difficult one because this one has to be crystal clear. It will be polished up in the end to look like glass, so we want to have a glass clear finish. The biggest thing here is preparation. So I have a brand new mixing cup, a brand new bucket. We have to pour about 6 liters, probably a bit more. The whole thing will be about a 12-liter pour, that's about 4 gallons. I also cleaned the slab and the table from all the dust and debris with dry cleaning fluid and isopropyl alcohol so that there's nothing left over and nothing can swim to the surface. Another trick with epoxy is it's very cold in my shop right now, so I heated it up a little bit with my space heater because otherwise it gets very non-viscous. Or viscous? No, non-viscous. Non-viscous is gooey, yeah. Otherwise it gets very gooey. Let's move on. Extremely nervous about this process because this could really F up everything. Breathe. Slow is smooth. Smooth is fast. You might have noticed the epoxy turned green when I mixed it. Yeah, I was surprised too. But after talking to the vendor, I found out it's actually the UV protection that causes that green tint. Spoiler alert, it cured crystal clear. Whilst the tabletop is drying, we're gonna focus our attention on our table base. The first step, what we have to do is we have to rough cut this Pacific maple to size. So I leave about 5 centimeters or 2 inches to each and every part. That's one tip I can give you. Leave it as big as possible, as long as possible. This will make your life so much easier down the track. Society doesn't help much either. There's this pressure to always show your best work, especially in the woodworking community. We see this perfect project on social media and think, why doesn't my work look like that? But we forget that people usually only share the successes, not the countless mistakes and do-overs that came beforehand. And let's talk about perfectionism for a second. In woodworking, it is easy to get caught up in the details. We want every cut to be precise, every joint to be flawless. But this drive to perfection can be a double-edged sword. See what I did there? It pushes us to improve, sure, but it can also lead to a lot of stress and self-doubt. The crazy part is, the people who experience imposter syndrome are often the ones who are really good at what they do. Not me, by the way, just saying. It's like the more skilled you become, the more you worry about not measuring up. Weird, right? So if even the skilled woodworkers doubt themselves, how do they push through and create amazing pieces? The answer lies in unexpected places. We are done with the rough cut of our parts now. There's going to be some complicated, well, at least for me, complicated angles that I have never done before. So this one's going to be super fun. But before we cut those angles, we have to go to the table saw and build a tapering jig. I just cut this one for our slot. I sanded it so it's nice and smooth and it goes back and forth. I like that version better than the fence version because if that edge is not 100%, then it wobbles. So next step, we're gonna put something underneath here, put some CA glue on top of that, and then we press the board on top of it. Then we push that board through the table saw and we have one exact edge where we can then line up our parts. First I ripped the leg parts down to their final width. Then I lined them up on my tapering jig to get the angles just right. To hold the legs in place I used the tape and CA glue trick, which worked super well. I kept everything secure while I made the cuts. Since this is Pacific maple, a pretty hard and dense wood, I took my time, going slow to make sure the cuts were as accurate as possible. The worst thing that could happen here is if the part moves and takes off too much material. Luckily, the first couple of parts turned out great. Next, I started ripping the thin front part off the legs. Just as I was in the middle of it, I heard a... That's when I realized the tabletop had cured. And in true ADHD fashion, I abandoned the legs and immediately started demolding the top. Once the top was out of the mold, I remembered I was still in the middle of working on the legs, so I went back to finish them. For the joinery, I'm using half laps. These are super strong and perfect for supporting the weight of the tabletop. But this is where I made my first mistake. Okay, so I just made a big mistake, which basically ruined this piece. So I have to redo this one, so I've lost one of the stretcher pieces from the side. Why? Because I made two exact pieces instead of making two separate ones, like two mirrored ones, because obviously one has to go like this, and the other one has to go like this, but I make both like this. So we have to redo this one, and thank God I didn't ruin the second leg yet. We really can't fix this mistake, but this is exactly why you always buy a little extra material. Something like this happens, and trust me, it will. You can keep going with your project without delays. After rough sanding the legs to clean them up, I trimmed the joint pieces to their final size. But then I remembered I still had to build a drawer, so I decided to tackle that. Okay, now we're gonna have a look at the shelf underneath. So the client wants to have a smaller desk, but for that she wants to have a big shelf underneath that you can pull out for the keyboard and mouse. So this shelf will span the whole width of the table, basically doubles the depth of the table. That's a great idea of the client. She has a very specific space where it goes to, and with that we're really optimizing the space there as well. For this panel glue up, I'm gonna use my Toccata panel clamps, which are awesome and exactly what we need. Very easy to use, and they make it so that I can put lots of pressure on it without panels bowing in any direction. When I was knee-deep in building that complex desk, feeling overwhelmed and unsure about myself, I stumbled upon a game changer, the woodworking community. You might think, how can chatting with strangers online help me build better furniture? Trust me, I was skeptical too. But there's the thing, these communities are full of people just like us, facing the same challenges and doubts, and they are more than happy to share their knowledge and experiences. I remember the day I finally decided to reach out. I was stuck on the base design, feeling like I was in way over my head. With shaky hands, I snapped a photo of my work in progress and sent it to a couple of woodworking friends. I held my breath, half expecting to be laughed out of the group, but you know what? The response was amazing. Instead of criticism, I got encouragement. Instead of judgment, I got advice. People started chiming in with suggestions, sharing similar experiences, and offering tips on how to tackle the tricky angles I was struggling with. This interaction did more than just help me with the technical aspects of the build. It gave me a much needed confidence boost. Suddenly, I didn't feel so alone in my struggles. I realized that even experienced woodworkers face challenges and have moments of doubt. The power of these connections goes beyond just problem solving. It's about building a support network that understands what you're going through. When you're woodworking alone in your shop, it is easy to get stuck in your own head, amplifying every doubt and insecurity. But having a community to turn to can help put things in perspective. Okay guys, so we are ready to glue up our two leg parts. So this is gonna be our main leg parts like this. So the biggest issue we are facing right now is how do we get this has to be 100% square. So otherwise it would look weird. So if that would be like forward a little bit or like this, this would look absolutely awful in the end product. So I want to have this one absolutely square. But what I came up with is I'm gonna put this here and use this edge as a reference. I put some glue on. I clamped it on so that it's 100% straight, or I use the angle clamps that I'm having. And then I'm gonna put some screws in, just so it holds it together for clamping purposes. Those ones are temporary screws then. I can take them out later on and they will be replaced with dowels and covered by the stretcher piece. The angle of the skinny front leg was the next challenge. Since I'm an idiot and never fully think things through, I just started experimenting with different angles and just picked one that looked best to me. I settled on 15 degrees, which seemed to work. At least it looked good, in my opinion. My plan was to glue it on with a butt joint and then reinforce it with dowels. I've heard that dowels are really strong, so I figured they will do the job. However, I already struggled with clamping everything up. The simplest solution turned out best as usual. Using a pipe clamp with that 15 degrees offcut from that leg worked best. But once it was dry and I moved on to the dowels, that's when everything went to, well, see for yourself. No! Shit! Shit! Now in full panic mode, I tried to fix things. When in doubt, I figured just put a ton of glue into the joint and it should work, right? Right? Well, this part obviously didn't go as planned. It probably would have been a good idea to let the glue on the dowels dry before I did the stress test, but in the end, it didn't really make much of a difference. Once the glue was dried, I cut the legs flush, still leaving them long, so not final size. This is important for what's happening next. Look at this face. He has no idea what's happening next. Okay, so after we cut that leg to length, I wanted to test how strong it is. The dowels alone with the glue is not strong enough. Like it actually is not strong enough. So I could rip it off with my strength, and so that's not gonna work. So what are we gonna do next? So I have a test piece here that I did, and we're gonna inlay this third leg basically. So we're gonna inlay this diagonal leg to give it more glue surface. To do this inlay here, I'm gonna use the miter saw, and I'm terrified because if that is too big, we're gonna F up the whole thing. And I ran out of materials already. So if I mess this up right now, the legs are gone. Ton of time lost, like a lot of time, because I have to reorder more material. And basically, yeah, the whole project is delayed. It costs way more than I thought and would suck immensely. Wish me good luck by hitting the like button. Thank you. This experience taught me a valuable lesson. Sometimes we are our own worst critics. We get caught up in our vision of perfection, that we miss the beauty in what we have actually created. Having that outside perspective can be a game changer. But it's not just about getting help when you are stuck. Being part of these communities also gives you the chance to help others. And let me tell you, there's nothing quite like the feeling of being able to offer advice to someone who is struggling with something you've overcome. It's a reminder of how far you have come, even when you don't feel like that. Oof. Okay, so the legs are finally dry and also super solid. Now, next step, we are cutting the legs to a final size. Then we have to fit the stretcher in. So with our jig that we made, we have to drill holes so the dowels fit and the stretcher fit. We assemble everything and see how it looks. Please look good. Let's rewind a bit. Remember how stressed I was when everything went sideways? I felt like a total fraud, questioning if I even wanted to turn my woodworking into a business. But now looking back, I realized something important. The journey of building that desk taught me way more than just the new techniques I tried. I learned that pushing through tough times really pays off. There were so many moments when I wanted to give up, but I kept going even when it felt hopeless. And you know what? Each time I solved a problem, I got a little boost of confidence. That's not to say that it was easy, far from it. I still remember staring at the half-finished desk, feeling totally overwhelmed. But here's the thing. Every challenge I faced made me a better woodworker. I learned new techniques, figured out how to solve problems, and gained a ton of experience. Now let's talk about the big question. Do I really want to sell custom furniture? Honestly, I'm still not 100% sure. There's no denying the thrill of seeing finished pieces and knowing someone's willing to pay good money for it. But at the same time, turning my hobby into a business changed how I felt about woodworking. Okay, so we finally sent everything to 180 grids. Next step, one requirement that the client wanted is gray legs. So we gotta use Rubio Precolor Easy, and we're using that monsoon gray. So this is what we decided, the client and I. So I'm gonna do this now, and then we're gonna assemble everything after. This just makes it easier to get in all of those little nooks and crannies. And if there's any touch-ups to do later, we can do that with this one, no problem at all. Next, I moved on to installing the hardware. This desk is designed to hide as many cables as possible. So I ordered a few cable organizers and a monitor arm from Desky. I have to say, these products are really high quality. I'm not sponsored or in any way affiliated with them. I just really think they're great products. To cut out the hole for the cable grommet, yes, that's what that is called, I used a hole saw. I didn't have the exact size needed, but here is where it pays off to have a laser in your shop. I quickly made a template, traced it with a template bit, and voila, which means there you go, a perfect fit. The monitor arm was super straightforward. It basically just needed a hole drilled through the tabletop, and then you could mount it through. I even tested it with a monitor I had lying around. This one is a little small, but the actual monitor will be much bigger. We are ready to glue up, and I am terrified. We taped everything off. We sanded off all the pre-color, so I am horrified right now. Like, this could ruin the whole base, basically, as always. Glue ups are super stressful. So this one will be glued on with end grain. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna pre-soak it with the Titebond, and then put another layer on it. So I'll leave it like for, I don't know, 15 minutes, and then I'll put another layer on top of it so it doesn't sink in as far. I'm also gonna glue in those ones as well, but we have to get everything together before it's hard, because if they, for example, kink in any kind of direction, because the hole is a tiny little bit oversized so that the glue can fit in, and it doesn't fit anymore, it doesn't align anymore, we have huge issues. So because when it's this hard, it doesn't move anymore, and then the dowel will break. Couple of challenges here, but fingers crossed, everything goes okay. I've prepped everything. The only thing I still need is a damp rag to clean up the glue squeeze out, and then ready to go. You can immediately see how that one sucks in the glue. The end grain is like straws sucking in everything. Messy as usual, messy. Okay, it's like 10 minutes later, and I can see still there's a little bit of glue still on there on the surface, so I think we are good to go. So one of these ones, those silicone things, are super useful, especially for like the dowels. So I'm gonna dunk the dowels in. I'm actually regretting putting tape all over the legs to prevent the glue squeeze out. It left stains everywhere. I'm not sure if I used the wrong tape or the Rubio Precolor just didn't like it, but keep that in mind if you're using Precolor like I did. So, huge mistake, I forgot to tape the stretcher. Tape the legs, but not the stretcher. I'm so worried about the legs that I forgot the stretcher. Anyway, we're gonna go get in here and get this wiped off everything as much as we can. My workshop is my safe space where I can relax and get away from the world. During this project though, it often felt more like a pressure cooker. I missed that feeling of just creating for the joy of it, without worrying about deadlines or the client's expectation. But here's the cool part. Even with all the stress, this project reignited my love for woodworking in a way I didn't expect. It pushed me to try new things and really test my skills. And when I finally stepped back and looked at that finished desk, I really felt proud. So what's the most valuable thing I built during this project? It wasn't a desk. It was my confidence in myself and my abilities. I proved to myself that I could take on projects that are completely out of my depth, figure out solutions to tricky problems, and create something special. Now we are ready to mount our legs. So I already measured it out and it's completely in the center. I'm gonna drill those couple of holes with this Forstner bit. This will then hide the heads of my bolts that I'm gonna use. The plan is not to hit any epoxy. First of all, here you would see it. And second of all, threaded inserts in the epoxy suck. After we drill this countersink hole with this Forstner bit, I'm gonna drill a hole with a normal drill bit, oversized to this one so that wood movement is allowed, and then set the threaded inserts in the table. Next, we're gonna look at the shelf. So there's gonna be a pull-out shelf with the keyboard on it and like a nice neoprene thing on top of that. I'm also reinforcing the shelf here on the side. This also allows me to get the shelf as low as possible. The final size is gonna be the width between the leg minus this. So I'm gonna measure this out right now, how much that is, and see if it's consistent. Now we're gonna do something terrifying. We somehow need to get the cables for the monitor up. This is where the monitor goes. So it looks like this. We're gonna make it completely hidden. So I'm gonna go with a Forstner bit and make 2 big holes next to each other about here. So that it will be still fully covered. And then I try to cut out something on the leg here so that the cable can come through here and then feed into the arm. I just put a second coat of the pre-color easy onto the base and to the shelf. So while they are drying, we are focusing again on our tabletop and do the final step here. So the next step in our tabletop is to polish the epoxy to a glass clear finish. So first we are sanding everything to 8000 grits. There's a lot of wet sanding involved as well. And this is the reason why we are finishing the table beforehand with Rubio monocoat. One, because that oil penetrates quite deep into the wood, and when we start wet sanding here everything, I don't want the timber to be attacked too much. One tip with sanding, finishing, especially if you polish epoxy, put a light source like this very close to the tabletop, so once you start with the sanding, you can see if there's any scratches left over from the previous grit, so that later on you don't have any surprises when you start polishing, because those deeper gouges or scratches will not be removed with the polish or with the higher grit of sandpaper. So I put that here, so if I look down, I can see exactly what is happening on the epoxy. Okay, so because this project runs already so freaking well, I obviously have an issue now with the polishing as well. So I polished everything and then I had to step out, come back, and I wiped everything off, cleaned everything up, and now I can see swirl marks everywhere. And I didn't figure out for a while why they're there. And then I noticed that the suction from my dust collector was really low. And I'm like, shit, literally it didn't suck up the dust. Now there's so many mini swirl marks in there. So I probably have to go back to like, I don't know, at least I think they're 400 grit ones, because somehow my dust collector got clogged and it's full, so we have to clean that out and then go back to 400 grit. So what was the big takeaway from all of this? You don't have to wait until you feel 100% ready to start a project. Jump in and give it a shot. It's normal to feel overwhelmed sometimes. It's just part of learning and growing. Remember, every woodworker started somewhere. Even the pros had the first project. And hey, don't keep your journey to yourself. Share your woodworking stories, even in the comments below if you like. We are all learning together here. Reach out to other woodworkers. Trust me, you are not alone in this. Now that you know how to overcome these massive hurdles, you're ready to tackle on a project like this. And as always, I appreciate you, and I'll see you next time.